This passage is one of the most beloved in all Christendom. It is perhaps read in more prison cells, in more hospital rooms, beside more caskets, with the depressed, the discouraged, and the hurting, perhaps more than any other passage in all the Scriptures. It's a beautiful passage. As Kathy sung it, now let's read it together, please. I'll read these words. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for Thou art with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Most of us don't know a lot about sheep or caring for sheep. We live in an agrarian society, or don't live in an agrarian society. Most of us don't know much about shepherds either. Wouldn't have the slightest idea how to care for a lot of sheep. Julie and I were chatting this week and wondering if David were to live in our technological high life type culture, what would he write? Maybe he wouldn't write, "The Lord is my shepherd." What if he wrote, "The Lord's my babysitter"? Now think about that. When you were growing up, having a good babysitter was very comforting, wasn't it? Very secure when mom and dad were gone, knowing that you had a babysitter who'd watch over you and care for you. We had some favorites we liked to have take care of our children. Karen Kapfer was one. The girls loved it when Karen came. She brought a big suitcase full of toys and puzzles and games and candy. And the kids loved her, had a great time with Karen Kapfer. In fact, Julia and I often said, they have more fun with Karen than they do with us. She was a great babysitter. Glenn Bartow's brother-in-law, Todd Follett, was one of our favorite babysitters. You know, he was the only one that Brahma would allow to pull her baby teeth. Think of that. He came over one time as I was trying to get one of Bronwyn's teeth out. I had the string on the door, and I was trying to get the string on her tooth, to slam the door, and out come the tooth. And Bronwyn wasn't enjoying this. And Todd said, "Let me try." And lo and behold, if Todd didn't get his hand in there, and he pulled out that baby tooth, and from that day forward, the only one who could pull Bronwyn's teeth was Todd Follett. He was a great babysitter. A lot of security. She loved that. Both of the girls did. Loved Todd. Of course, you don't always get good babysitters. Julie and I were called to Dallas on an emergency. 3 days, 2 nights we were going to be gone. It was a hurried trip, and recommended to us was a young lady who attended here at Casa. She agreed to watch over our children. While we were gone, she stole Julie's wedding rings for drug money. She dropped off our children at the neighbor's house and left Tucson. Now, could you imagine that wasn't a very good babysitter? How frightened our children want to have one like. The Bible calls those folks hirelings. You think about it, if you have children, you're their shepherdess, aren't you? You do anything to watch over your kids and take care of them, and you do it a lot. No matter how messy, no matter how many problems they have, you're shepherding your children. I remember one time, it was, Bree was maybe 2, and she wakes up, maybe one, and we hear this, wah, 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 3 o'clock in the morning, and, Julie says to me, "It's your turn." No, it's your turn. No, it's my turn. No, it's not. No, it's not. Your turn. You do it. I did it last. So she got up. Feed the baby, change the diaper. A few moments later, I hear this, "Help, help, help, Roger, help, help me." I raced in. You can imagine the cry. And here's what I see. She's got Bronwyn under this arm, and the diaper's kind of hanging loose, and there's poop rolling all down her jammies, all down her thigh, and she's standing there with his hand catching all the poop that's getting ready to hit the rug. And she can't move, because if she moves, it's going to get all over the rug. I did the only appropriate thing. I broke into raucous laughter. You just should have seen it. It was great. And it's the funniest thing I ever saw, till Julie gave me a stare, and it wasn't funny anymore. so I helped her get out of that mess. See, the truth is, all of us sheep have poopy diapers sometimes, don't we? And what does a good shepherd do? No matter how poopy our diaper, no matter how dirty, how much we spill on ourselves, our good shepherd still picks us up, cleans us up, loves us and cares for us, because that's what good shepherds do. Now, Psalm 23 is one of the most familiar, but it might also be one of the least understood passages in the Bible, because we don't know about shepherds. When David wrote this, everybody knew about sheep and shepherds. We don't know much about these. So we go through these phrases and realize we may not know as much about this psalm as we think we do. Couple of thoughts might help come this alive. Number one, this psalm is written from the perspective of a sheep, not the shepherd. We call this the shepherd's psalm. It's really not. It's the sheep's psalm. Because as you read this, you get the impression David got down on all fours. He's playing like he's a sheep, and he's looking up at the Lord who's his shepherd. And if you see it from that perspective, all kinds of exciting things come out of this passage. The second thing is this. The first verse is the theme of all 6 verses. See, the Lord is my shepherd. And here's the deal. Because the Lord is my shepherd, the rest of the psalm falls into place. If he's not your shepherd, then none of this psalm applies to you. It's because he's my shepherd that all these good things are going to happen. So let's look at the phrases, shall we? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I love that. I like to meditate on that. Maybe you do too. I like to sit sometimes and imagine that I'm a sheep and Jesus is my shepherd. And here's what I see. I'm looking up at my shepherd, and can you imagine the look on Jesus' face as he's looking down at you? And what do you see in his eyes? This tremendous love and compassion. This sort of this attitude that, you know, you're mine now. I'm going to take care of you. All's going to be well. I'll be your shepherd. Can you see his face now? And can you imagine you looking up at Jesus' face? And what do you see? Not just the compassion, but you see the confidence, the boldness, the power, the security, and this relationship. Now, he's my shepherd. Why would I want anyone else? He's my shepherd. John Lynch ran a national children's ministry in the States a number of years ago. He was speaking in a church, and all the children were gathered around him, and he said, who'd like to quote Psalm 23? And one little 8-year-old, her hands were coming out of her socket, I will. So he called on her to quote Psalm 23. She got in front of the church, and here's what she said. The Lord is my shepherd. He's all I want. And she sat down. That's all she knew. And maybe that's all she needed to know. Now, if he's the shepherd, what's that make us? Sheep. Doesn't it bother you that he calls us sheep? You know, wouldn't it have been nice if he'd called us lions, tigers? You know, wouldn't that have been nice? He never said, or how about owls? We're wise as owls, cunning as a fox. He calls us sheep. And that kind of offends me because sheep are stupid. Do you know that? They're just stupid. When's the last time you went to the circus and saw a troop of trained sheep? They don't train sheep. Monkeys, birds, you know, llamas they'll train. They've even trained fleas. But they don't train sheep. Because sheep are rather unintelligent animals. See, I don't mind that. Because I need a shepherd. Don't you? I don't want to try to go through life on my own. I want a shepherd who transcends life and time and eternity and knows how to take good care of me. I don't mind being a sheep when he's my shepherd. And he makes me lie down in green pastures. Now, I always thought that the cool part of that verse was the green pastures. When you read that in Hebrew, you understand the key to the verse is not the green pastures. The key is the verb. He makes me lie down. See, sheep are, well, they're frightened. They're defenseless. Think about this. Those spindly little legs, those little cloven hooves, there's no solid foundation. All that wool on their backs, it's like a cow. You can just take your hand, you can tip a sheep over. They have a hard time getting up. And they're grazing, and all of a sudden there's the shout of a wolf or the call of a lion, and what do? They scatter. And they're running. And even when the threat's gone, they still haven't settled down. And sometimes it's the job of the shepherd. See, he makes me lie down. He catches, usually the leader of the sheep, grabs it by the nape of the neck, and he forces that sheep right on down into the ground to make it stop. See, in our hurried, harried lives, sometimes the Lord Jesus has to slow us down and help us reevaluate life and our pace. And sometimes, we get sick. Sometimes we lose a job. Sometimes there's an accident in our family, and it's kind of like, it makes us lie down now. Now we're going to reevaluate. We want to rethink. I'll tell you a strange thing. Had heart trouble a couple of years ago, had a procedure called an ablation to fix a rhythm problem. And now this is going to sound really strange to you. I was looking forward to it. You know why? Because I knew that for 4 or 5 hours I was going to be half drugged, still semi-conscious, and I was going to lay while I put this catheter up into my heart and fix this problem. And nobody could call me on the phone, and nobody could bother me, and I was going to have 4 and 5 hours just there quiet all alone. Now, is that screwy thinking or what? I just wanted a break. And it worked for 3 weeks, and then it didn't work. We're going to do it again. And you know what? I could hardly wait. Because for 4 hours, I was going to lay on that table. Somebody else was going to take care of me. I didn't have to take care of anybody. And the phone wasn't going to ring. Now, is that life out of control or what? And sometimes he makes us lie down now. You've had that happen. And you're going to reevaluate now about what's important in life, what your pace is like. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. See, sheep drowned. Think about it. Sheep know instinctively not to go near deep waters nor fast running waters, because if a sheep falls in the water, the wool soaks up all the water and that sheep drowns. They don't survive this stuff. And so it's time for a drink. And so the shepherd goes to these running streams and he gets some rocks and he makes a little dam and he kind of quiets a little pool, and the sheep go now, they take a drink where it's safe. And can you imagine in your life sometimes you're running so fast, you're getting thirsty because of the barrenness of your busy life, and all of a sudden you watch the shepherd, and he's taking these stones, and he's making this little quiet dam where the waters are still and quiet for us. Has he done that for you? Has he given you the chance to slow down? Now, that's your choice. You don't have to. You can keep on running if you want to. And we run. Did you know the average American sleeps 2.5 hours less than they did 100 years ago? Before electricity, the average person slept 10 hours right after electricity went to 9 hours. In 1950, the average American slept 8 hours. In 1990, it was 7 hours, and today it's less than 7 hours. When's the last time you stopped by the still waters? Court reporters now let us know that the average person speaks 40 to 50 words per minute faster than they did in 1990, 15 years ago. It's such a fast pace. 56% of Americans say they are more exhausted after a vacation than before they started one. We can keep this up, and it kills us. When's the last time you stopped by the still waters? Now, you got that choice. Psalm 131, I have calmed and quieted my soul. You can keep living at this pace if you want to, but think about it. We now have the technology to make ourselves available 24 hours a day. We've got technology that has outpaced our physiological ability to handle it. 28% of Americans admit they fell asleep driving last year. And I think about Jesus. Did he live a quiet life? Yeah. He didn't even have a cell phone. And he did pretty good, didn't he? He didn't own a car. He walked everywhere he went, and he did pretty good, didn't he? You don't have to do this. You can quiet your soul. You can calm yourself. He restores my soul. Now, what does that mean? I used to think that meant kind of when you're depressed, he lifts you up. When you're down, he pours in the power. He restores it to the way it ought to be. Until you read that in Hebrew, and what the word really means is it's taking somebody who's going the wrong direction and turning them around the correct direction. It's the equivalent of the New Testament Greek word of repent. He repents my soul because I'm heading the wrong direction, so he's got to turn me around here. It's what Isaiah 53:6 says. All we like sheep have gone astray. See, Everyone goes his own way. And the Lord laid on Christ the sins of all of us because he's going to die for our waywardness. But the point, everybody runs their own way. And so there comes a time in our life when the Lord has to grab us and he's got to turn us around in the right direction. He's restoring our soul. But there are some lambs that are really stubborn. You watch little baby lambs. They're stubborn and they're stupid. And they run this way and they run that. And oftentimes they get caught in the briars and the brambles. And the shepherd's got to pull them out of the briars and the brambles and get the stickers out of them. Sometimes they fall over a little cliff and he's got to take his staff, clips them by the neck, and he brings them back. If there's a hole in the fence, a little lamb will find it. And now he's outside the fence and outside of protection. They just go all over the place. And sometimes there are some lambs who won't stop it. What do you mean he restores my soul? Now he's talking about an inward bent. It's my soul. It's the bent to run away, wrong direction. He restores my soul. So he takes that little lamb, puts it in his arms, he takes his rod, takes that little leg, and pop, he breaks that little leg. And then he puts that sheep around his neck. And while that leg mends with a splint, he carries that sheep everywhere he goes. Till it's well. You've seen those beautiful pictures from Handel's Messiah as they're singing about the loveliness of the shepherd who's carrying the little lamb and how beautiful. Isn't that sweet? That little lamb's around the shepherd's neck. And I want to tell you this, that sheep isn't thinking this is sweet because he's got a broken leg because he wouldn't get with the plan. He kept running away. And unless I miss my guess, and I'll speak quite freely, some of you have been wayward. See, the way of the transgressor is hard. And there are some splints in this congregation. And he's broken your leg. And you look at your life. Well, how in the world did it come out like this? How did I end up over here? Why is my life such a mess? Why am I so wounded and hurting, struggling? And it may be that your answer is right here. Just imagine. He's broken your leg. You took the hard way. He's turning around your soul. Now just imagine. Some of you are going through this right now. I want you to imagine the shepherd has you around his neck, and he's popped your leg. It's in a splint. But you're recovering, and you're recovering in the arms of the shepherd, and you whisper. Now imagine you're whispering into the shepherd's ear. You know, that really hurts. Some of you said that. This accident. You know, God doesn't cause all these things, nor really be involved. It's a fallen world. But there are times when he says, that's enough. He's saying, let it hurt. It does hurt. And he says what? What's he say? You know, I want you to be somebody really special. And you were heading the wrong way. And the only reason I did that is because I love you. Don't you say that to your children when you discipline them? I want you to be somebody special. The reason I want to discipline you is because I don't want you to behave like that. I'm doing this because I love you. That's the job of the shepherd. And he leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. What's that mean? In Hebrew, it's he gives me the right tracks. He shows me the right direction. When I was 6, my brother was 3. We went to Galveston for a family vacation. And my daddy was taking us from the hotel down across the beach to the water. And, of course, the sand on the beach, you know, that's really hot. And he looked back, and everywhere he had stepped, here was Roger and Ronnie being very careful to stretch our legs and put our feet just in my daddy's footprints. He said he turned around and he watched us for a moment, and then he said, what are you boys doing? And I said, well, the sand's not as hot where you stepped. My dad said that was a real lesson for him, to be sure his life was on the straight and narrow because his kids were following him. See, we can follow the great shepherd. We step in his footprints. It's not as hot there. He's leading us in the right paths. He's got us on the right tracks. But unless I miss my guess, there's some of us here who tried to be our own shepherd. And we went, how did our lives end up here? It reminds me when Brianna was quite young, and she and Julie were in Dallas, and Bree got an awful ear infection, and it was time to fly home, and the doctor said no. Take a week or 10 days. So Julie and Brianna and Julie's mom Wanda got on the Amtrak to go from Dallas to Tucson. And here's how the train went. Dallas to Waco to Austin to Houston to San Antonio at 1 morning. When at 1 a.m., They made everybody get off the train, and it sat there empty till 5 a.m. when they could reboard, and they went from San Antonio to San Angelo to El Paso to Las Cruces to Deming to Lordsburg to Tucson, and it took them 56 hours. It's no wonder Amtrak has so many problems. You know, you think about it. 56 hours. You know what I just described? Some of your lives. Didn't I? You've been wanting to go from Dallas to Tucson. How'd you get in Houston? What are you doing off the train in San Antonio? Some of you are doing that right now. Why? Because you didn't make the Lord your shepherd. Because when the Lord is your shepherd, he takes you on the right path for his name's sake. Now that's important. See, so often we get in Christianity and say, it's all about me. You know, okay, I'll come to the church that meets my needs. If you don't meet my needs, I'll find someplace else. No, we lock into a congregation because it's not about us. So the expression of Christ's body, the church, can be powerful in his hands. See, this is not about us. It's for his name's sake. How does a sheep bring profit to the shepherd? He just grows his wool. And the shepherd takes him from A to B, and he shears the sheep, and he takes the wool, and he makes a profit. And this ought to be beautiful for some of us who are trying so hard to live the Christian life. Just enjoy yourself. Just go with the flow. It's the shepherd's job. Just follow the shepherd. He'll take you where you need to go, and you're just kind of, as you live in the Spirit, grow in the wool. And that's for his profit. It takes a lot of pressure off. But the tone changes here. Yea, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not how I've always found it. It's kind of scary to walk through the shadow of death, isn't it? It is. But when we've got life in perspective, we don't need to fear it, but it is kind of scary. I was walking my dogs the other night, and in the distance, 50, 60 yards away, a car stopped as these children on bicycles ran in front of the lights. And then they were all gone, and the car started, and I'm tootling down the sidewalk with my dogs. There's a big wall right here, and all of a sudden, I've got my flashlight. I realize about 20 feet in front of us, those weren't children on bicycles. That was 12 or 13 javelina. And there's some big old javelina. And they started snorting, and my dog started barking. And I'm thinking, because javelina, if they charge, can be devastating. I'm thinking, we're going to die, So I'm dragging my dogs, trying to shine light in these faces to keep those javelina from coming out. I'm dragging these dogs back across the street, and they're all having a fit. Isn't that sometimes how life is? Isn't it? I don't know of any passage in Scripture where God guaranteed when you became a Christian everything was going to be great. He just didn't. He's promised us a life of hardship, didn't he? And difficulty. And there's times of loneliness and times of stress and struggle. But we move through these things. Why? Because I am with you. I'll fear no evil. He pours in the power. And let's set the record straight. He didn't say, you might. He said, even though. When. And a Christian can lose a job, lose their health, experience the death of a loved one, a car crash, troubles and obstacles, and yet be at peace, have no fear, because the shepherd has never lost a single sheep yet, and he never will. But does the Lord know what's going on? Yes. When he's the shepherd, he's leading us in the right paths. He's never made a mistake. Why? For you're with me. See the next verse? Why don't I fear? Because you're with me. Can you imagine all the animals around? I don't think my dogs were excited because I was with them, but they should have been. They just should have been. Because if I'd let them go, they would have gotten really hurt. I'm with you. And your rod and your staff, they comfort me. These are powerful tools. The staff is the positive one. Little crook, the shepherd's staff. Little sheep falls over the cliff. Shepherd pulls it to safety. And the rod was about a 2.5-foot oaken log that the shepherd had hammered in bits of bone and maybe a little glass and some pottery and some bronze metal. And it was his club. It was his rod. And he, as David said, I used my rod to knock off a lion one time, and I finished it off with my bare hands. And the smell of the lion's breath was on, and he was hitting him with his rod. And we know that sometimes, imagine yourself just at the green pastures, and all of a sudden you hear this, shoo, 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 shoo. Hey, what was that, you say? And the other sheep says, oh, that's just the shepherd. Thunk. Hitting that lion over there on the head with his rod. These are verses of protection. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. What are the sheep's enemies? They had some natural enemies. One was a little brown adder. What's the table? Where they're going to eat. And we don't know this stuff because we're not shepherds and sheep. But what happened was there was a little brown adder that would pop out of these holes when the sheep were at pasture. He'd bite the sheep on the face, put them in frenzy. So the shepherd would go along with his staff and he'd look for these little adder holes, and he'd put a little mixture of linseed oil and pitch, awful smelling stuff, around those holes. And then the sheep could eat at their table because the snakes wouldn't come out with all that stench. He's taking care of us. You anoint my head with oil. Sounds kind of messy, but this was a protection thing. There was a little fly in Palestine that oftentimes would land in the sheep's nose and get into their mucous membrane and lay their eggs in there. And when the eggs hatched, little larvae came out and they began eating through the flesh of the mucous membranes of that sheep. And oftentimes the sheep trying to rub those things off would rub their skin off their faces in the dirt or on a pole, and some died. And so again, he used that linseed oil and that pitch, and he'd rub it around their nostrils to keep the flies from landing there. It's protection. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. See, that's a little stone cup, very common in Palestine, where the shepherd would, they couldn't drink out of a well, and so he'd draw the water and he'd put it in the cup, and he'd put it in the cup. It may take 2 or 3 hours to water the flock. They'd all drink out of these little cups. It would overflow. And that's what he says about the shepherd. It's what Jesus said, I'm the living water. Out of my body flows living water. And it's the picture of no matter how difficult life is, there's a Savior who's pouring in the power, and the living water is just refreshing us as that cup overflows. And with pardonable imagination, he says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. Now, who are goodness and mercy? It's the sheepdogs. See, you got a sheepdog named Goodness, sheepdog named Mercy, and they're following him all the days of his life. There's our Shirley, and there's our Goodness. If we'd known Goodness a little more before we named him, we might have called him Sneaky or Curious or Always in Trouble. See, we got a Shirley, we got a Goodness. I always wanted 3. And when Julie lets me finally, we're going to have a Mercy. And in our house, there'll be a Shirley and a Goodness and a Mercy. Love those dogs. Those are the ones that just follow in our heels. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord. Oh, let's go back to the house. Jesus said, in my Father's house are many mansions. I'm telling you the truth, when you die, I'm going to go get you and bring you back. You're going to live in the Father's mansion forever in the Father's house. We don't fear walking through the valley of the shadow of death when the physical death comes, because you're with me, because Jesus says at the moment of death, I myself will take you by the hand, and I'm going to take you right on into the Father's house, to the mansion, and I've already fixed up your bedroom. Can you imagine that? Now picture the shepherd. You're coming near to die. It's kind of a frightful thing, I think, for most of us. No matter how far along in the spiritual life, there's a lot of questions, a little fear. And can you imagine the shepherd going, it's okay. It's okay now. It's all right. You can go ahead and die. Come on. I died for you. You're going to live forever. Come on, I got your house. Can you imagine at death, the shepherd just kind of going, come on now, it's okay. It's okay. And we get to go home. Of course, not everybody makes it home. Not everybody makes it. See, the only ones who make it necessarily are the ones who've made the Lord their shepherd. And if you don't want the shepherd, if you want to live your own life and do it your own way and make your own decisions and say, I don't need a shepherd, well then, see, none of this psalm applies. It's because the Lord is my shepherd. And how does he become my shepherd? Well, that's Isaiah 53. All we like sheep have gone astray. Everyone goes his own way. And the Lord has laid upon Christ all of our sins. Whoever believes in Christ, sins forgiven, moves into his flock. And all this psalm comes to pass. So let's apply this. These are in your sermon insert. Just 3 thoughts of all the thoughts we could have. Number 1, live close to the shepherd. Why would you want to live anyplace else? Number 2, if the Lord is your only shepherd, you don't have enough shepherds. Well, if the Lord's my shepherd, that's all I want. Well, you know what? Genesis 2 says Adam had all of God he wanted, and God said, you and me's not enough. You need some other people. I'll make you a wife. And the truth is, we all need shepherds. If the Lord's your only shepherd, you don't have enough. That's why we have adult Bible fellowships and all kinds of Bible groups, because you need to be in a flock. And finally, doesn't it seem like those who have plumbed the depths of their own inadequacies are the very ones that God calls to shepherd others? Have you noticed that? See, it's because Jesus Christ plumbed the depths. Think about it. He was called illegitimate. They called him a devil. He was rejected by his hometown. He was rejected by his family. They cursed him. They mocked him. They put him on a cross. They stripped him naked before earth and heaven. Talk about the shame. And because of all that, he knows everything we go through. And because of that, he's qualified to be a great shepherd. It's those who've plumbed the depths that he invariably calls to be shepherds. Remember Peter, night before he was crucified. Jesus says to the guys in the upper room, all of you will desert me. What'd Peter say? Not me, Lord. These other guys might, but I'll always be true. And remember what Jesus said? I'm so proud of you, Peter. Take care of my sheep. Is that what happened? No. All of you will desert me. Not me, Lord. Oh, yeah, Peter, even you. Satan's prayed to sift you, and I'm going to pray you don't fall. But he did. 3 times he denied him. I don't know him, I don't know him, I don't know him. Shamed himself. In fact, he quit Christianity, went back to fishing on the Sea of Galilee, and 3 weeks later the Lord appeared. Peter, do you love me? No. I denied you. And Jesus still says, feed my sheep. You love me? Nah. I embarrassed myself. My behavior's, I don't love you. And he said, tend my lambs. The 3rd time, do you love me? See, it's only after Peter had plumbed the depths of his own inadequacies, then and only then does the shepherd, the good shepherd, call Peter to be the shepherd of his sheep. So don't despair when those difficult time comes, and you've been through some of those. See, it's that very experience that God might use, just like he used with Christ. And he's going to call you to be a shepherd, because the church needs shepherds and shepherdesses who are willing to trust the good shepherd, so that out of their experiences they shepherd as well. See your shepherd? It's a great shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. We're going to take a moment now and remember the good shepherd and share communion together. As our folks go to prepare to serve here in just a moment, I want you to bow your heads for a moment with me. Jesus said, as often as you take the cup